Jake Hendricks was having what he considered a perfectly normal Tuesday, which meant he was currently being chased by someone who wanted to either arrest him, kill him, or sell him an extended warranty on his ship. Given the blinking red lights on his console and the very official-looking warship materializing behind him, he was betting on arrest. His cargo hauler, the Mediocre Destiny, shuddered as a tractor beam locked onto its hull. Jake sighed and reached for his coffee, which was floating somewhere near the ceiling because he'd forgotten to fix the gravity generator again. Some problems just weren't worth solving. The communication system crackled to life with a voice that sounded like someone had taught a textbook how to talk. "Attention, human vessel Mediocre Destiny. This is Commander Vrell of the Galactic Compliance Bureau. You are hereby detained for suspicion of performing illegal hyperspace maneuvers in violation of Statute 47 Alpha, subsection 923, paragraph 16, footnote 8. Jake blinked. "There's a footnote." "The footnote is legally binding," Vrell continued, completely missing the sarcasm. "You are accused of executing what is commonly known as the Kepler Slip, a maneuver expressly prohibited in 12 galaxies due to its flagrant disregard for space-time integrity, causality preservation, and basic common sense." "Cool story," Jake said, finally retrieving his coffee and taking a sip. It was cold. Everything was terrible. "Here's the thing, though. I didn't do it. Our sensors detected a Class 7 spatial anomaly consistent with—" "Your sensors are wrong." There was a pause. Jake imagined Vrell's brain trying to process the concept of someone simply denying objective evidence. It was a technique Jake had perfected over years of dealing with customs agents, port authorities, and his ex-girlfriend. "Human. Our detection equipment is calibrated to within 0.0001% accuracy." "Sounds expensive. Did you keep the receipt?" Another pause, longer this time. Jake was pretty sure he could hear something grinding. Teeth, maybe, or gears. With aliens, you never really knew. "You will dock with our vessel immediately for questioning. Failure to comply will result in the use of force, followed by significantly more paperwork for both of us." Jake considered his options. He could run, but the Mediocre Destiny was already held by the tractor beam, and besides, he was curious. The Galactic Compliance Bureau didn't usually bother with small-time cargo haulers like him. They were too busy busting smuggling rings and shutting down illegal arms dealers. The fact that they'd pulled him over specifically meant someone had noticed something. And yeah, okay, maybe he had performed the Kepler Slip. Once, or twice. Possibly 17 times in the last month. But here was the beautiful thing about the Kepler Slip. It happened outside observable space-time. By definition, it couldn't be recorded, measured, or proven. It was the perfect crime, except it wasn't a crime if no one could prove it happened. "Fine," Jake said, finishing his terrible coffee. "But I'm billing you for my time. Standard consulting rates apply. You will be compensated exactly 0 credits. See, this is why everyone thinks you guys are no fun." The docking procedure was smoother than Jake expected, which meant Vrell's crew actually knew what they were doing. The Compliance Bureau ship was exactly what you'd expect from an organization that probably had a 500-page manual on proper stapler usage. Clean, efficient, and soul-crushingly beige. Jake stepped through the airlock and came face-to-face with Commander Vrell. The alien was tall, purple, and had enough facial tentacles to make an octopus jealous. They were arranged in what Jake assumed was an expression of deep disapproval, though with aliens, it was hard to tell. Could have been their version of a smile for all he knew. "Jake Hendricks," Vrell said, checking a datapad that was probably filled with Jake's greatest hits. "Born Earth, year 2287, licensed cargo pilot with 43 citations for minor violations, 12 warnings for creative interpretation of flight regulations, and 1 commendation for—" Vrell paused, tentacles twitching. "Best barbecue at the Proxima Station annual picnic?" "I make a mean brisket," Jake said proudly. "Low and slow, that's the secret. Well, that and the dry rub. I'd give you the recipe, but I'd have to kill you. How fortunate that I lack the biological capacity to consume Earth-based proteins." "Your loss, buddy." Vrell's tentacles arranged themselves into what was definitely disapproval now. "You will follow me to the interrogation room, where you will answer questions regarding your recent flight activities." "No." "Is there coffee in this interrogation room?" "No." This is already going great. As they walked through the ship's corridors, Jake couldn't help but notice the other crew members giving him looks. Some were curious, some were nervous. One particularly jumpy alien actually pressed themselves against the wall as he passed, like Jake might suddenly explode or start speaking in tongues. Humans had a reputation in the galaxy, and not all of it was good. They were known for being unpredictable, creative in deeply unsettling ways, and possessing a survival instinct that bordered on supernatural. Most species had evolved to respect the laws of physics. Humans had evolved to find loopholes. The interrogation room was just as beige as everything else. Jake sat down in a chair that wasn't designed for human anatomy and tried to get comfortable. Spoiler, it didn't work. Vrell sat across from him, datapad at the ready. Standing near the door was another alien, smaller than Vrell, with large eyes and skin that shifted colors based on what Jake assumed was emotional state. Currently, it was cycling through nervous yellow and terrified green. "This is Junior Officer Kix," Vrell said. "They will be observing this interview as part of their training." Jake waved. "Hey, Kix. First time meeting a human?" Kix's skin flashed bright orange. "I have read 47 incident reports involving humans. All of them ended with the phrase, 'How was that even possible?'" "Yeah, that sounds about right." Jake leaned back in the uncomfortable chair. "So, Commander Vrell, you dragged me all the way here because you think I did something that, by your own admission, can't actually be detected or proven. Do I have that right?" Vrell's tentacles tightened. "Let us begin." Commander Vrell tapped the datapad with one tentacle, while three others arranged themselves in what Jake was starting to recognize as the alien equivalent of cracking knuckles. This was going to be fun. On stardate 47923.6, at approximately 0300 hours Galactic Standard Time, Jake scratched his chin thoughtfully. "A lot of things can cause spatial anomalies, Commander. Solar flares, quantum fluctuations, spontaneous pocket dimensions. Did you check for spontaneous pocket dimensions?" "There were no spontaneous pocket dimensions." "Did you check, though?" Vrell's tentacles quivered. On stardate 47925.1, another anomaly. Same characteristics, same flight corridor. Your ship was logged leaving station Kepler 7 exactly 43 minutes before the anomaly was detected. "Coincidence," Jake said with a shrug. "I'm just a lucky guy. Won $5 in the station lottery once." On stardate 47926.8. "Let me guess, another anomaly?" "Yes. And I was in the area?" "Precisely." "Wow," Jake said, shaking his head in mock wonder. "You know what this sounds like to me? Swamp gas." From the corner, Kix made a noise like a confused dolphin. "There is no swamp gas in space." "That's exactly what swamp gas wants you to think." Vrell's skin was starting to darken, which Jake figured meant increasing blood pressure, or the alien equivalent. "Human Hendricks, I have 47 documented cases of spatial anomalies that perfectly align with your flight schedule, your routes, and your cargo deliveries. The statistical probability of this being coincidence is pretty high, apparently, since I didn't do anything wrong." Jake held up his hands innocently. "Look, I get it. You've got quotas to meet. Somebody upstairs is breathing down your neck tentacles about illegal maneuvers. But I'm just a simple cargo hauler trying to make an honest living. Your cargo manifest lists your current shipment as 500 crates of completely legitimate merchandise. See, completely legitimate. That is not a real description of goods. It's real enough for the manifest." Kix's skin had shifted to a fascinated purple. "Commander, if I may, in my research on humans I found that they often employ a communication technique called lying, where they say things that are factually incorrect but socially strategic." "I'm aware of lying, Junior Officer Kix." "Are you, though?" Jake asked. "Because you keep asking me questions like you expect honest answers." Vrell's tentacles made a gesture that the translator decided to render as deep existential frustration. "Very well, let us approach this differently. Can you explain to me what you were doing at coordinates 847223991 on stardate 47923.6? "Sure," Jake said. "I was reheating pizza." Silence filled the interrogation room. Even the ship's ventilation system seemed to pause out of respect for the sheer audacity of that statement. "You were reheating pizza?" Vrell repeated slowly. "Yeah, Had some leftover from station Kepler 7. They make this amazing pepperoni and mushroom situation, but it was cold, and the Mediocre Destiny's microwave is busted, so I figured, hey, why not use the reactor core? It's got all that heat just sitting there going to waste. Kix's color shifted to alarmed red. You put food in your reactor core? Just near it. I'm not stupid. That is highly debatable, Vrell muttered. Anyway, I might have accidentally vented some plasma while I was retrieving the pizza. Could have caused a minor spatial disturbance, probably read like an anomaly on your sensors. Vrell consulted the datapad. The energy signature was equivalent to 47,000 terawatts focused into a single point in space-time. It was really good pizza. And the other 46 incidents? Jake thought for a moment. Weather balloons. In space. Space weather balloons. They're a thing. Look it up. They are not a thing. Then I guess you learned something new today. Education is important, Commander. Vrell set down the datapad with a thunk that suggested it took significant restraint not to throw it at Jake's head. Human Hendricks, the Kepler Slip is not merely illegal due to bureaucratic oversight. It is illegal because it tears holes in the fabric of reality. It causes causality violations. It makes the universe angry. The universe doesn't have feelings. It does after humans interact with it, Jake grinned. Now you're just being dramatic. Am I? Vrell pulled up a holographic display showing a mess of equations that made Jake's eyes hurt. The Kepler Slip works by exploiting a mathematical loophole in faster-than-light travel. You essentially convince the universe that you're in two places at once by being in 0 places at once. The energy required should theoretically tear your ship apart at the molecular level. Should being the key word. How are you not dead? Clean living and good genetics. Kix, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke up. Commander, I have a theory. What if the human discovered the technique by accident, as he claims, and simply lacks the intellectual capacity to understand how dangerous it is? Hey, Jake protested. I understand danger just fine. I choose to ignore it. That's different. That is somehow worse, Vrell said. Look, Jake leaned forward, suddenly serious. Here's the thing about the Kepler Slip, hypothetically speaking. If someone were to perform it, which I'm not saying anyone did, it happens outside observable space-time. That's the whole point. It's like Schrodinger's cat, except the cat is a spaceship, and instead of being alive or dead, it's neither here nor there until it decides to be somewhere. That is not how quantum mechanics works. Says the guy who can't prove I did anything wrong. Vrell's tentacles drooped in defeat. You are the most infuriating being I have encountered in my 20 years of service. I get that a lot. I don't doubt it. There was a long pause. Jake could hear the ship's systems humming in the background. Kix's skin had settled into a confused teal color, like their brain was trying to process too many contradictions at once. Finally, Vrell spoke. There is one way to resolve this matter definitively. Oh yeah? What's that? You will perform a standard hyperspace jump under our direct supervision. If you are truly incapable of executing the Kepler Slip, this will prove your innocence. Jake felt a smile tugging at his lips. And if I refuse, then I will have sufficient grounds to impound your vessel and detain you indefinitely pending investigation. That sounds boring. It is meant to be. Jake drummed his fingers on the table, pretending to think about it. In reality, his brain was already 3 steps ahead, calculating angles and possibilities. This was exactly the kind of opportunity he lived for. The chance to prove he was right in the most spectacular way possible. Okay, he said finally. I'll do it. But on one condition. You are not in a position to make conditions. Sure I am. You need me to prove I can't do the thing you think I did. That gives me leverage. Jake grinned. So here's my condition. We make it interesting. A small wager. Vrell's tentacles twitched with suspicion. What kind of wager? If I perform a completely standard, boring, regulation-compliant hyperspace jump, you admit you were wrong, clear my record, and buy me dinner at the next station. Deal? And if you perform an illegal maneuver? Then you get to arrest me, impound my ship, and write a very satisfying report about how you were right all along. Kix looked at Vrell nervously. Commander, is this wise? Probably not, Vrell admitted. But at this point, I simply want this matter resolved." The alien stood, tentacles straightening with renewed authority. "Very well, human Hendricks. We have a wager. Prepare your vessel." Jake stood and stretched. "This is going to be fun." "I sincerely doubt that," Vrell muttered. But Jake was already thinking about what he was going to order for dinner. The Mediocre Destiny looked even more mediocre docked next to Vrell's pristine enforcement cruiser. Jake's ship was a patchwork of mismatched hull plates, improvised repairs, and what appeared to be duct tape holding together a section near the starboard thruster. Vrell stared at it with the kind of horror usually reserved for discovering your surgeon learned medicine from a cereal box. "This vessel is spaceworthy?" Vrell asked, tentacles arranged in deep concern. "She's gotten me this far," Jake said, patting the airlock affectionately. "Besides, beauty is on the inside. I fear to discover what the inside looks like. Smart fear." They boarded the Mediocre Destiny with kicks, following nervously behind. The junior officer's skin was doing a rainbow cycle of anxiety colors. Jake figured this was probably the most exciting thing that had happened to them since joining the Compliance Bureau, which said a lot about how boring the job usually was. The ship's interior was exactly as chaotic as the exterior suggested. Equipment was strapped to walls with what might have been bungee cords. The navigation console had a coffee stain shaped like Abraham Lincoln. There was a plant in the corner that Jake was 60% sure was supposed to be dead. "How do you navigate with this equipment?" Vrell asked, examining a control panel that looked like it had been assembled from 3 different ships and a toaster. "Carefully," Jake said, sliding into the pilot's seat. "Okay, so here's the plan. I'll jump to the coordinates you specify using a completely standard, absolutely boring, regulation-compliant hyperspace sequence. You'll monitor everything from your ship. When I arrive exactly when I'm supposed to arrive, you'll realize you've been chasing shadows and we can all go get that dinner. The Compliance Bureau does not pay for meals as part of investigation outcomes." "Then you're paying personally. That's what makes it a wager." Vrell's translator emitted what sounded like a sigh. "Very well. Kix, return to our vessel and monitor all sensors. I want readings on spatial integrity, temporal consistency, and reality cohesion." "Reality cohesion?" Jake asked. "It's a measurement we developed specifically because of humans." "I'm flattered." Kix hurried back to the enforcement cruiser while Vrell remained on the Mediocre Destiny, tentacles gripping a support beam like their life depended on it. Which, Jake thought with amusement, it probably did. "Coordinates locked in," Jake announced, typing commands into his jury-rigged navigation system. "Destination is Sector Gamma 15, approximately 47 light-years from our current position. Standard jump time is 4 hours. "Proceed," Vrell commanded. Jake's fingers hovered over the controls. "You know, Commander, before we do this, I should probably mention something." "What?" "You're going to want to hold on to something more secure than that beam." "Why?" "Just trust me on this one." Vrell's tentacles tightened their grip. "Execute the jump, human." Jake grinned. "Your funeral." He initiated the hyperspace sequence, and the Mediocre Destiny's engines began their warm-up cycle. Normal procedure would be to wait for the engines to reach optimal power, align with the destination coordinates, and then engage the hyperspace drive in one smooth, controlled motion. Jake did not follow normal procedure. Instead, he diverted power from life support to the shields, rerouted the navigation computer through the coffee maker, for reasons even he didn't fully understand, and punched in a sequence of commands that technically shouldn't have done anything except maybe void the warranty. "What are you doing?" Vrell demanded. "Those inputs are not standard." The universe hiccuped. That was the only way to describe it. Reality folded in on itself like origami made by someone who'd never seen paper before. The Mediocre Destiny was suddenly in 5 places at once while simultaneously being nowhere at all. Light bent at right angles. Time said, "You know what, I'm taking a break," and wandered off to get coffee. Jake felt the familiar sensation of the Kepler Slip taking hold. It was like falling up while standing still while moving faster than light. His inner ear hated it, but his sense of accomplishment loved it. Then, because Jake was fundamentally incapable of doing things halfway, he added a little flourish. "This," he announced to no one in particular, "is what I call the drunk uncle." He input 3 more commands that violated causality so hard that somewhere a physics professor woke up screaming. The ship lurched, reality gave up entirely, and the Mediocre Destiny simply decided to be at its destination. Not traveled to, not jumped to, just was there. Always had been there, would always be there. Tense became a polite suggestion. The navigation console beeped cheerfully and displayed their arrival time. Euro 943 hours. Jake checked his watch. It read, Euro 946 hours. They'd arrived 3 minutes before they left. Huh, Jake said. Shaved off a minute from my personal record. Behind him, Vrell made a sound like a garbage disposal trying to process a philosophical treatise. The alien's tentacles had gone completely rigid, frozen in an expression Jake interpreted as, my entire worldview just shattered, and I'm not sure how to process that. The communication system crackled. Kix's voice came through, pitched about 3 octaves higher than normal. Commander, are you reading this? The sensors, they don't make sense. They can't make sense. According to our instruments, the Mediocre Destiny arrived at the destination before the jump sequence initiated. That's not possible. That's not... A pause. Commander, I think I'm having an existential crisis. Join the club, Vrell whispered. Jake spun his chair around to face the alien. So, about that dinner. I'm thinking seafood. Do you guys have seafood? Or the alien equivalent? Space food? I'm flexible. Vrell's tentacles slowly unfroze, arranging themselves into what Jake was pretty sure was the alien equivalent of a 1,000-yard stare. You performed an illegal maneuver. Did I, though? According to the official records, we're at our destination right on schedule, maybe even a little early. 3 minutes early! Punctuality is a virtue. You violated causality. Causality is more of a guideline than a rule. It is a fundamental law of the universe. Jake shrugged. Universe should have read the fine print. Listen, Commander, here's the thing about the Kepler Slip. Actually, forget the Kepler Slip, that's amateur hour. The drunk uncle takes it to the next level. See, most people think time moves forward. But that's only because they're not creative enough to ask it nicely to move backward. That's not how time works. Vrell's voice had taken on a desperate quality, like someone watching their carefully organized filing system get thrown into a tornado. It is, if you believe in yourself. From the communication system, Kix's voice returned, still shaky. Commander, we're receiving priority hails from multiple sources. They're all asking about the temporal anomaly we just created. Apparently, the ripple effect was detected across 3 sectors. Vrell's tentacles drooped. This is a nightmare. This is Tuesday, Jake corrected. Though technically it might be Wednesday now, or still Monday. Time's gotten a bit wibbly. The alien stumbled to a viewport and stared out at the stars, which were exactly where they should be for Sector Gamma 15. Everything was perfect. Everything was normal. Except they'd broken the universe to get here. I don't understand, Vrell said quietly. The energy requirements alone should have vaporized your ship. The mathematical impossibility should have prevented the jump from occurring. The universe itself should have rejected what you just did. Yeah, Jake agreed. It's weird how things work out sometimes. How is this possible? Jake stood and walked over to the viewport, standing next to the traumatized alien. You want the honest answer? Please. I have no idea. Vrell turned to look at him, all tentacles pointing in an accusatory fashion. You have no idea? Not a clue. I mean, I know what buttons to push and in what order. But the actual physics of it? Above my pay grade, buddy. I'm just a cargo hauler who got lucky while reheating pizza. That cannot be the explanation. And yet, the communication system crackled again. Commander, we're receiving hails from, a lot of ships. Some of them don't sound friendly. Vrell's tentacles arranged themselves into what Jake was pretty sure meant. I've made a terrible mistake. What have you done? The alien whispered. Jake checked his scanners and felt his stomach drop. Okay, so here's the thing. Remember how I said news travels fast in space? Yes? Turns out it travels even faster when you accidentally send out a temporal shockwave announcing to everyone in 3 sectors that someone just did something really illegal and really impressive. On the scanner, ships were appearing. Lots of ships. Some were running toward them, Some were running from them. Several were just sitting there like they couldn't decide which was the better option, and all of them wanted a piece of whatever had just happened. "I think," Jake said carefully, "we might need to continue this conversation later, possibly while running." Vrell looked at the scanner, then at Jake, then at the scanner again. "I am going to file so much paperwork about this. If we survive, I'll help you with the spelling." The first ship opened fire and Jake dove for the pilot's seat. "Hold on! Things are about to get interesting. They're already interesting." "Then they're about to get more interesting." The Mediocre Destiny's engines roared to life, and Jake plotted their escape route while Vrell held on and questioned every life choice that had led to this moment. Behind them, the fleet of ships accelerated in pursuit, and somewhere in the galaxy, a physics professor woke up screaming again. It was shaping up to be a great Tuesday. The problem with breaking causality in a highly monitored shipping corridor was that everyone noticed. And when everyone noticed a human doing something that shouldn't be possible, they all had the same thought: I want that for myself. Jake pulled the Mediocre Destiny into a hard turn that would have given a normal pilot whiplash and possibly a religious awakening. Vrell's tentacles were wrapped around every available surface, the alien's skin having shifted to a color that Jake's translator unhelpfully labeled as regret incarnate. 13 ships on our tail, Jake announced, checking his scanners. No, wait. 14. 15. Okay, this is getting ridiculous. "This is the consequence of your actions," Vrell shouted over the sound of the engines straining at their limits. "My actions were awesome. This is the consequence of other people being jealous of my awesomeness." The communication system lit up with multiple incoming hails. Jake put them on speaker because at this point, why not make things even more chaotic? "Human vessel, this is Captain Cracks of the Crimson Fang. Surrender your navigation techniques immediately, and we'll only take most of your stuff. Representing the Freelancers Guild, we'd like to offer you membership with a very competitive benefits package including dental. Dr. Felmus Gorvin from the Institute of Temporal Studies, and I am begging you to let us scan your ship. Because my entire doctoral thesis just became obsolete, and I need to understand how you—" Jake muted them all. "See what you did, Commander? You just had to demand a demonstration. I was attempting to prove your guilt. Well, congratulations. You proved it so hard that every pirate, smuggler, and nerd in 3 sectors wants to either steal from me, hire me, or study me. This is your fault." "This is your fault. Agree to disagree." A plasma bolt screamed past the viewport, missing them by what Jake's instruments generously called not much. He jinked left, then right, then performed a barrel roll that definitely wasn't necessary but looked cool. On the enforcement cruiser, Kix was trying to maintain formation while broadcasting increasingly desperate appeals for calm. "This is the Galactic Compliance Bureau. All vessels are required to stand down and return to— Please, I'm begging you, just stop shooting at each other. Does anyone respect the law anymore?" The answer, based on the amount of weapons fire lighting up the scanners, was absolutely not. "Commander," Jake said, dodging another volley, "I'm going to need you to make a decision here. Are you still trying to arrest me, or are you now trying to not die?" Vrell's tentacles twitched in what might have been thought. "Can't I do both? In theory? Sure. In practice? We've got about 4 minutes before one of these ships gets a lucky hit and we all become exciting debris." Another hail came through, this one with enough priority encryption to bypass Jake's mute. A voice that sounded like gravel being dragged through a trash compactor spoke in heavily accented galactic standard. "Human. This is Warlord Thex'nor of the Obsidian Armada. You will teach me your technique or I will reduce your ship to component atoms." Jake glanced at his scanner. The Obsidian Armada consisted of 12 heavily armed warships that looked like they'd been designed by someone who really, really liked weapons, and also more weapons, and maybe some additional weapons just to be safe. "That's a pretty aggressive negotiation tactic," Jake said. "I am not negotiating. I am informing you of inevitable outcomes." Right. Quick question, though. If you reduce me to atoms, how exactly do I teach you the technique? Seems like a flaw in your plan." There was a pause. "You make a valid point. I will reduce you to mostly atoms. Enough to maintain consciousness for teaching purposes." "That's horrifying." I am told I have a gift for motivation. Jake cut the connection and looked at Vrell. Okay, new plan. We're going to need to work together on this one. Work together? You're a criminal. Yeah, but I'm a criminal who knows how to not die, which is a skill you're going to want access to in about 3 minutes. The ship rocked as a blast hit the shields. Alarms started blaring, because apparently the day wasn't stressful enough without added audio enhancement. Shields at 60%, Jake reported. We can take maybe 4 more hits like that before things get exciting in a bad way. Vrell was calculating rapidly, tentacles moving in patterns that suggested deep thought or possibly a nervous breakdown. Finally, the alien spoke. What do you propose? I'm going to teach you the Kepler Slip. That's illegal. So is dying. Pick your priority. Another hit. Shields at 45%. Kix's voice came over the communication, panic evident even through the translator. Commander, I've lost my starboard thruster. Navigation is compromised. I think the physics professors are trying to grapple onto my hull. Why are the professors the scariest ones? Jake shouted. Because they're motivated by pure academic desperation, Kix screamed back. Jake pulled up the navigation interface and transferred a copy to Vrell's datapad. Okay, look. The Kepler Slip isn't actually that complicated. It's just, completely impossible and violates several laws of reality. That is not reassuring. It's not supposed to be reassuring. It's supposed to be true. Now pay attention because I'm only going to explain this once. You see these coordinates? They're not real coordinates. They're imaginary coordinates. Imaginary coordinates don't exist. Exactly. That's the point. You're navigating to a place that doesn't exist, and because it doesn't exist, the universe can't stop you from going there. And once you're somewhere that isn't anywhere, you can then decide to be anywhere else. Vrell stared at the datapad like it had just insulted their entire family. That is the most absurd logic I have ever encountered. And yet it works. But why does it work? Because the universe runs on rules, and rules have loopholes, and humans are really, really good at finding loopholes. The ship shook again. Shields at 30%. Things were getting dire. Commander, Kix called out. I need orders. What do I do? Vrell looked at Jake, then at the datapad, then at the swarm of ships trying to kill them, study them, or recruit them. The alien's tentacles were trembling with what Jake recognized as a crisis of conscience. Everything in Vrell's training said to follow the rules, respect the law, maintain order. But survival had a funny way of rearranging priorities. Kix, Vrell said slowly, I am going to transmit a sequence of coordinates to you. You are to input them into your navigation computer exactly as I send them. Do not question. Do not hesitate. Simply execute. Commander, these coordinates don't... I know they don't make sense. Input them anyway. On the Mediocre Destiny, Jake was already laying in his own jump sequence. Okay, here's the tricky part. You have to believe it's going to work. Belief is not a component of navigation. It is for this. The Kepler Slip works because you convince the universe that you're right and it's wrong. You have to commit to the bit. No second guessing. No doubt. Just pure, stubborn, human-style confidence in the face of overwhelming evidence that you're about to do something stupid. I am not human. I cannot simply ignore logic. Jake grinned. Then fake it till you make it, buddy. Shields at 15%. Multiple ships converging. Warlord Thex'nor broadcasting increasingly creative threats about atom distribution. The physics professors were now trying to board Kix's ship, which was both terrifying and slightly sad. Now or never, Commander, Jake shouted. Jump on my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark. He executed the sequence. The Mediocre Destiny folded itself out of reality like a napkin at a fancy restaurant. On the enforcement cruiser, Kix stared at their console, at the impossible coordinates, at the universe's rulebook that they'd spent years memorizing. Then they thought about Jake's words, about confidence, about committing to the bit, and thought, screw it. If I'm going to die, might as well die doing something interesting. They executed the jump. Both ships vanished from normal space, leaving behind a very confused fleet of pirates, smugglers, and academics who were suddenly shooting at empty space. Inside the Mediocre Destiny, reality reasserted itself with all the grace of a drunk elephant. Jake checked his scanners and let out a whoop of victory. We're clear. No hostiles, no pursuit, no murderous warlords. Vrell was making a sound that the translator couldn't quite process. It settled on rendering it as existential groaning. You okay there, Commander? I violated everything I believe in. Yeah, but you're alive. That's got to count for something. A hail came through from Kix's ship. The junior officer's voice was shaky but triumphant. Commander, I did it. I performed an illegal maneuver and we survived, and it was terrifying and amazing, and I think I understand why humans are the way they are. That being? Vrell asked weakly. They're all absolutely insane, and somehow that makes them lucky. Jake laughed. See? The kid gets it. Now, about those dinner plans. We are not having dinner. We are going to return to headquarters, and I am going to file a report that will require its own filing cabinet. Your funeral. But you're missing out on some great space food. Vrell's tentacles arranged themselves into something resembling determination fighting through trauma. Human Hendricks, this situation has evolved beyond my initial jurisdiction. I am placing you under protective custody. That sounds like arrest with extra steps. It is arrest that acknowledges you are now a valuable asset that multiple criminal organizations want to acquire. There is a difference. Is the difference that I still don't get to leave? Precisely. Jake considered this. On one hand, he valued his freedom. On the other hand, having the Galactic Compliance Bureau as a shield against every pirate and warlord in 3 sectors was not the worst outcome. Tell you what, Jake said, I'll come quietly on one condition. You let me keep flying the Mediocre Destiny, and when you inevitably need someone to do something impossible, you call me first. That is not how protective custody works. It is now, because we both know you're going to need me again, probably sooner than you think. Vrell was silent for a long moment. Then, with the air of someone accepting an inevitable catastrophe, the alien nodded. Very well, but you will follow all regulations, submit to regular inspections, and cease performing illegal maneuvers. Sure thing. You're lying. Oh, absolutely. But you're going to pretend to believe me because it makes the paperwork easier. I hate that you're right. They set course for Compliance Bureau headquarters, a journey that would take several hours through normal space. Jake made coffee. Vrell contemplated career changes. Kix sent 17 messages to friends about their new human-induced philosophy on life. Everything was settling into a nice, calm routine, which of course meant something was about to go wrong. The something that went wrong announced itself with the subtlety of a meteor through a greenhouse. Every alarm on both ships started screaming simultaneously, which Jake felt was a bit dramatic but fair. Multiple contacts jumping in, Kix reported, voice tight with panic. 14 ships. No, 18. 23. Commander, it's the Obsidian Armada. How did they find us? Vrell demanded. Jake checked his scanners and winced. Okay, so, funny story. Remember how I said the Kepler Slip happens outside observable space-time? Yes? Turns out when you do it enough times you leave kind of a signature. Like breadcrumbs, except the breadcrumbs are tears in the fabric of reality and anyone with decent sensors can follow them. You led them directly to us. In my defense, I didn't know that was a thing until literally just now. The communication system crackled with Warlord Thex'nor's voice. Human, your evasion was impressive but ultimately futile. You will surrender yourself and your techniques to the Obsidian Armada, or we will demonstrate why we have conquered 47 star systems. Jake muted the channel. Okay, new plan. We're going to need to fight our way out. Fight? Vrell's tentacles arranged themselves in horror. This is a compliance enforcement vessel, not a warship. We have exactly one defensive turret, and it was installed in 2287. Hey, vintage is trendy. It barely works. Then we'll have to get creative. Jake pulled up a tactical display showing the Obsidian Armada's formation. They'd arranged themselves in a perfect encirclement pattern, which was tactically sound but also kind of boring. Kix, how are your shields? 40% in holding. But Commander, I have to tell you something. When I performed that jump, when I did the impossible thing, it felt right. Like, really right. I think I might be good at ignoring physics. Vrell made a sound of deep despair. I've lost both of you to human madness. Look at it this way, Jake said cheerfully. At least we're all going crazy together. That's basically team building. Another hail from Thex'nor. You have 30 seconds to respond before we open fire. Jake unmuted. Quick question. If you blow us up, you definitely don't get to learn the technique. So what's your actual play here? We will disable your vessels, board you, and extract the information through aggressive negotiation. Torture? You mean torture? I mean aggressive negotiation with invasive learning tools. That's just torture with extra words. Jake looked at Vrell. Okay, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to teach you both the real Kepler Slip, not the basic one, the full version. There's a more advanced version? Vrell's tentacles were pointing in all directions, which Jake interpreted as maximum stress. Yeah, see, the Kepler Slip is like physics kindergarten. What I'm about to show you is physics doctoral program. Except instead of getting a degree, you get to thumb your nose at causality. This is insane. Yep, Kix, you ready to get more insane? Honestly, Commander, at this point, why not? We're already facing 24 warships and probable death. Might as well die doing something interesting. Vrell's tentacles drooped in defeat. I cannot believe I am about to agree to this. That's the spirit! Jake started entering coordinates into both ships' navigation computers through the shared tactical network. Okay, here's the thing about the Kepler Slip. It works by convincing the universe that you're somewhere you're not. But it requires something that most species can't do. What's that? Kix asked. You have to be willing to completely ignore 3 fundamental laws of physics and 1 strongly worded suggestion from the universe itself. Vrell stared at the coordinates appearing on the console. These numbers don't just break physics, they insult physics. They mock it. Exactly. See, you're getting it. I'm not getting it. I'm observing it with mounting horror. The timer from Thex'nor hit 0. The Obsidian Armada opened fire. Plasma bolts and missile contrails lit up space like the universe's worst fireworks show. Jake put all power to shields and started evasive maneuvers, which was fancy talk for flying like someone who learned to drive from video games and fever dreams. Shields at 60%, he reported. Kix, how you doing? Shields at 30%. Commander, with respect, I would really like to not die today. Vrell was staring at the navigation coordinates, tentacles trembling. I cannot do this. I am a law enforcement officer. I enforce laws. I do not break them. I especially do not break the laws of physics. Commander, Kix's voice came through, strained but determined. I've been in the Compliance Bureau for 3 years. Know what I've learned? Sometimes following the rules means everyone dies. And sometimes breaking the rules means everyone lives. I'd rather be alive and guilty than dead and correct. Jake dodged 3 missiles and a plasma beam. Kid's got wisdom beyond their years. Kid is encouraging me to commit crimes. Kid is encouraging you to survive. There's a difference. Shields at 40%. The Obsidian Armada was closing in, weapons charging for another volley. They had maybe 1 more minute before this turned from dangerous situation to rapidly expanding debris field. Vrell's tentacles moved across the console, trembling as they hovered over the command inputs. Everything in the aliens' training screamed to reject what was being asked. But then Vrell looked at the tactical display, at the overwhelming force bearing down on them, at Kix's ship barely holding together, at this impossible human who'd somehow survived by being too stubborn to follow rules, and made a choice. If I do this, Vrell said slowly, and we survive, I want it on record that I was coerced. Sure thing, Jake agreed. And that this was performed under extreme duress. Absolutely. And that I formally object to everything about this plan. Your objection is noted and ignored. Now input those coordinates before we become a cautionary tale. Vrell's tentacles moved. Commands were entered. The universe looked at what was being asked of it and filed a complaint with management. Kix, Vrell said, voice steadier now. Execute jump sequence on my mark. Do not think about what you are doing. Do not analyze. Simply commit. Committing to not thinking, Commander. I'm ready. Jake grinned. See, you're a natural teacher. Okay, everyone, here's the trick. The Kepler Slip works because you tell the universe you're going somewhere. But what we're about to do, we're going to tell the universe we're going everywhere at once. and then we're going to pick one everywhere to actually be. That makes no sense, Vrell protested. It doesn't have to make sense. It just has to work. Execute in 3, 2, 1. All 3 ships jumped simultaneously. Reality didn't just bend. It folded itself into origami, unfolded into a paper airplane, and then decided to be a hat instead. The Mediocre Destiny and both Compliance Bureau vessels existed in a state that mathematicians would call undefined and philosophers would call deeply troubling. They were everywhere. They were nowhere. They were in between where everywhere and nowhere held their annual meetings. And most importantly, they were not where the Obsidian Armada was shooting. 23 warships fired at empty space. Warlord Thex'nor's roar of frustration was probably audible from several light years away. Inside the Mediocre Destiny, Jake whooped with joy. It worked! We did it! Inside Kix's cruiser, the junior officer was laughing with the unhinged energy of someone who'd just stared into the abyss, and the abyss had said, "Actually, you're right about everything." Inside Vrell's cruiser, the commander sat in silence for a long moment before speaking. "I just performed a maneuver that is illegal in 12 galaxies. Technically 15 now," Jake corrected. "I checked the updated regulations last week. I violated every principle I swore to uphold. You also saved all our lives. That doesn't make it legal." "No," Jake agreed. "But it does make it awesome." There was a pause. Then Vrell said something that surprised everyone, possibly including Vrell. "It was kind of awesome." "I'm sorry, what?" "I said it was kind of awesome." Vrell's voice had taken on a manic edge. "I just told the universe to sit down and shut up, and the universe actually did it. Do you understand how empowering that is? I have spent my entire career being told that regulations and rules and laws are absolute. And in 30 seconds I learned that they are actually just strong suggestions that can be ignored if you're sufficiently confident." "Commander," Kix said nervously, "are you okay?" "No, I am having a crisis, but it is an exhilarating crisis." Jake checked their position. They jumped to a quiet sector far from any patrol routes or shipping lanes. Safe. For now. "Okay, everyone take a breath. Vrell, I need you to not have a breakdown until after we figure out our next move." "What next move? We just escaped. We're safe." "Yeah, but we left a temporal wake the size of a small moon. Thex'nor's going to track us again. We need a permanent solution." "What kind of permanent solution?" Jake's grin turned absolutely feral. "We're going to do something so illegal, so impossible, so fundamentally absurd that it'll make everything we've done so far look like parking violations." "What are you suggesting?" "We're going to jump to a galaxy that doesn't exist yet." Both Vrell and Kix's responses came simultaneously. "What?" "Think about it. Thex'nor is tracking our temporal wake, but if we jump to somewhere that won't exist for another few million years, there's no wake to track. We'll be safe." "That is not how time works," Vrell shouted. "It is if we make it work. Come on, Commander. You just broke reality once. Let's break it twice and call it a day." There was a long, long pause. Then Vrell spoke with the tone of someone who'd completely given up on having a normal career. "Send me the coordinates." "That's the spirit. I hate everything about this. You'll learn to love it." "I sincerely doubt that." But Vrell input the coordinates anyway. Because at this point, what was one more impossible thing before breakfast? The 3 ships aligned their navigation systems. Jake double-checked the calculations, which was his way of saying he made sure the numbers looked cool and didn't worry too much about whether they made sense. "Execute on my mark," he said, "and remember, commit to the bit." "Committing to the bit," Kix confirmed. "Committing to the bit while filing internal objections," Vrell added. "Good enough. Mark." The 3 ships jumped. Reality looked at what they were asking for, threw up its hands, and went on lunch break. The Mediocre Destiny and the 2 Compliance Bureau vessels vanished from the current time period entirely, leaving behind a temporal signature that would confuse scientists for the next century. They reappeared in a galaxy that was still cooling from the forge of creation, where stars were young and physics was still figuring out what it wanted to be when it grew up. "Well," Jake said, looking at the spectacular view of a newborn galaxy, "this is pretty cool." "We're technically time travelers now," Kix observed. "Yep, That's illegal in 47 galaxies. Yep, I'm okay with that. Vrell just laughed. It was the laugh of someone whose sanity had taken a vacation and decided to stay there permanently. We're criminals. We're all criminals now. I'm a Compliance Bureau commander and I'm a criminal. Welcome to the human experience, Jake said cheerfully. It's pretty great once you get used to it. They stayed there for a while, watching stars being born, waiting for enough time to pass that Thex'nor would give up the search. It was peaceful, in a we're defying the fundamental nature of reality kind of way. Eventually, they'd have to go back. Eventually, they'd have to face consequences. But for now, they just enjoyed the view and contemplated how one human with a terrible sense of self-preservation had fundamentally changed 3 lives forever. The return trip to normal space-time was surprisingly uneventful, which Jake found almost disappointing. Reality folded them back into the present with barely a complaint, depositing all 3 ships in a quiet sector near the Compliance Bureau's regional headquarters. Vrell spent the entire journey back staring at the navigation logs with the expression of someone reading their own obituary. This is going to require so much paperwork, the commander muttered. Mountains of paperwork. Paperwork that will require its own filing system. Paperwork that will achieve sentience and file complaints about the paperwork. Or, Jake suggested, you could just not file it. The silence that followed was profound. Not file it, Vrell repeated slowly. Yeah, just delete the logs. Tell headquarters we had a routine stop and search, found everything compliant, and sent me on my way. Clean, simple, no temporal paradoxes required. That would be falsifying official records. Yep, that is a serious crime. Uh-huh. I could be dismissed from service. Probably. Another long pause. Then Vrell's tentacles arranged themselves in what Jake had learned meant reluctant acceptance of terrible ideas. Kix, Vrell said over the communication channel. Prepare to purge all sensor data from the last 4 hours. Authorization Vrell Alpha 741. Commander? Kix sounded shocked. That's against regulations. I am aware. Do it anyway. Yes, Commander. Purging data now. This is exciting. Is this what being a rebel feels like? This is what covering up crimes feels like. There's a difference. Is there, though? No, Vrell admitted. No, there is not. Jake pulled up the Mediocre Destiny's own logs and started deleting. All evidence of the Kepler Slip. Gone. The drunk uncle. Never happened. The jump to a galaxy that didn't exist yet. Pure fantasy. According to official records, today had been completely, utterly, mind-numbingly boring. You know, Jake said as he worked, I'm kind of proud of you, Commander. First day we met, you were all about following the rules and upholding the law. Now here you are, committing conspiracy to obstruct justice. I am not proud of this development. Give it time. It grows on you. Like a fungus. Exactly like a fungus. The data purge completed just as they approached the headquarters station. It was a massive structure, all clean lines and efficient design, exactly the kind of place where fun went to die of boredom. Okay, Vrell said, taking a deep breath that translated as something between a sigh and a prayer. Here is the official story. I intercepted you for a routine compliance check. Your cargo was legitimate. Your flight logs showed no irregularities. I issued a verbal warning about minor navigation inefficiencies and released you with a recommendation for a software update. Boring and believable, Jake approved. I like it. After this, you will return to your normal routes. You will cease performing illegal maneuvers. You will, in all ways, become forgettable and unremarkable. Sure thing. You're lying again. Oh, absolutely. But you're going to pretend to believe me because it makes the paperwork easier. Vrell finished. I am disturbingly familiar with this pattern now. They docked at the station without incident. Vrell and Kix disembarked first, heading to their respective debriefing meetings. Jake stayed on the Mediocre Destiny, ostensibly to run post-flight checks, but actually to see if the coffee maker still worked after being used as a navigation computer. It did, which Jake considered a miracle on par with everything else that had happened today. 2 hours later, Vrell returned. The commander looked tired in a way that transcended species. The universal expression of someone who'd just spent way too long explaining why nothing interesting had happened. My superior officer accepted the report without question, Vrell said, slumping into the Mediocre Destiny's co-pilot seat. He seemed disappointed that it was so routine. The secret to good lying is making it boring enough that nobody wants to dig deeper. I hate that you're right. Story of my life. Jake poured 2 cups of coffee and handed one to Vrell, who accepted it with trembling tentacles. So what happens now? Now? I return to my regular duties. Kix returns to theirs. You return to your cargo hauling, and we all pretend this never happened. Except it did happen. Yes, Vrell agreed quietly. It did happen, and I performed maneuvers I swore I'd never perform, and broke laws I swore to uphold, and learned that sometimes the universe is less absolute than I believed. Character growth. It's uncomfortable but good for you. I preferred it when I was certain about everything. Yeah, but you were also kind of a pain in the ass. Vrell's tentacles twitched in what might have been amusement. I am still a pain in the ass, just a different kind now. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, 2 beings from different worlds who'd just shared an experience that neither would ever officially acknowledge. Finally, Jake spoke. You know you're going to call me again, right? Next time something impossible needs doing, I am aware. And you know I'm going to keep doing illegal maneuvers. Also aware. And you're okay with that? Vrell sipped the coffee, made a face that suggested it was both terrible and exactly what was needed, and said, I am learning to embrace plausible deniability. If I do not personally witness you breaking laws, did you actually break them? That's the spirit. You're thinking like a human now. That is not a compliment. It is, though. Before Vrell could respond, Kix burst into the ship, skin flashing excited yellow. Commander, I've been promoted. Promoted? Already? Yes. My superior officer said I showed remarkable initiative during our routine patrol. Apparently my flight efficiency ratings were the highest in the division, even though I don't remember submitting any efficiency ratings. Vrell and Jake exchanged glances. I may have, Vrell said carefully, included some supplementary data in my report about your performance. You mean you lied on my behalf? I prefer enhanced the truth for administrative purposes. Kix's skin flashed through several colors before settling on grateful purple. Thank you, Commander. This means a lot. Also, I've been thinking, if we ever need someone to do something that requires, let's say, creative interpretation of navigation protocols, I'd be happy to volunteer. Absolutely not. But we are not creating a secret task force of reality-bending criminals within the Compliance Bureau. Jake raised his hand. I mean, if you were going to create a secret task force of reality-bending criminals, I'd be available for consulting. No. Just saying, I offer very reasonable rates. Vrell stood up, tentacles arranged in exasperated finality. I am leaving. Kix, come. We have actual work to do that does not involve humans, impossibility, or temporal violations. But those are the fun things. Exactly. As they headed for the airlock, Vrell paused and looked back at Jake. Human Hendricks, if we should encounter each other again, we won't officially encounter each other, but we might unofficially be in the same sector occasionally. Then I unofficially hope your ship remains compliant with all regulations. And I unofficially hope you continue to have boring, uneventful patrols. They both knew neither thing would happen, but the polite fiction was comforting. Vrell and Kix left. Jake finished his coffee and started plotting his next route. Somewhere far from here. Somewhere interesting. Somewhere that would definitely, absolutely require at least one illegal maneuver. 3 days later, in a bar on station Kepler 7, Jake was approached by a nervous-looking Vaxian who'd heard rumors about someone who could teach the impossible. 5 days after that, a small group of pilots gathered in the Mediocre Destiny's cargo bay, all paying in cash, all sworn to secrecy. Jake stood before them with a grin. Okay, folks, welcome to advanced navigation techniques that definitely don't exist. I'm Jake, and I'll be your instructor for maneuvers that are banned in anywhere from 12 to 47 galaxies, depending on who you ask. The group leaned in, eager and terrified in equal measure. Today we're starting with the basics, the Kepler Slip. It's simple, elegant, and only moderately likely to kill you. But first, before we begin, you need to understand the most important rule of reality-bending navigation. He paused for dramatic effect. If anyone asks, you didn't learn this from me. You figured it out yourself. Maybe while reheating pizza. Maybe while drunk. Maybe while both. The specifics don't matter. What matters is that officially, this never happened. Acrylion in the back raised a tentacle. And if we're caught? Jake's grin widened. Then the only correct answer is, you didn't see it. Somewhere in the galaxy, Vrell was filing paperwork and pretending today was normal. Kix was practicing navigation techniques that definitely weren't illegal if no one could prove they existed. And Jake was teaching a new generation of pilots that rules were just suggestions written by people who lacked imagination. The universe grumbled quietly about the whole situation, but ultimately decided it had bigger problems to worry about. After all, what was a little casual violation of causality between friends? Nothing, according to official records. And officially, that was all that mattered. Jake pulled up his lesson plan, which was mostly just notes saying, "Wing it," and "Look confident," and addressed his students. Now, who wants to learn about something I call the Thanksgiving uncle? Fair warning, it makes the drunk uncle look responsible by comparison. Every hand in the room went up. Jake laughed. Yeah, I like this group already. Let's break some physics. And in that cargo bay, in that moment, with cash changing hands and secrets being traded, the galaxy got just a little bit more interesting, which, as any human could tell you, was exactly how it should be.